Stand with me for a moment and consider what brought you here today. Perhaps you've come seeking answers about self-fulfillment, or maybe you're following the well-worn path of those who chase the ever-elusive goal of self-actualization. But I must tell you something that may seem counterintuitive, perhaps even controversial. Self-actualization is not the goal. In fact, the more we chase it, the more it eludes us. Let me share with you a story from my own experiences. During my darkest hours in the concentration camps, I observed something remarkable. Those who survived weren't necessarily the physically strongest or the most self-actualized individuals. They were those who had something to live for, something beyond themselves. This fundamental truth has shaped my understanding of human nature and purpose. You see, we live in an age obsessed with self-improvement, personal development, and the relentless pursuit of happiness. Bookstores are filled with volumes promising to help you find yourself, maximize your potential, or achieve your best life. But this very pursuit is precisely what keeps us from finding what we truly seek. It's what I call the happiness trap. The more directly we pursue happiness or self-actualization, the more it escapes. Consider this paradox. When you aim at the target, you must focus on the target itself, not on your arm or the act of aiming. Similarly, human fulfillment cannot be pursued directly. It must ensue. It must follow as an unintended consequence of dedicating ourselves to something. Let me be clear, I am not suggesting that personal growth is meaningless. Rather, I am proposing that it occurs naturally when we transcend ourselves, when we reach beyond our own needs and desires to serve a greater purpose. This is what I call self-transcendence, and it is fundamentally different from self-actualization. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most alive, most fulfilled. Were they moments of self-focus, or were they moments when you were completely absorbed in something beyond yourself? Perhaps it was when you were helping someone in need, creating something meaningful, or fighting for a cause you believed in. These moments of transcendence are not accidents. They are glimpses of life's deepest truth. I remember a patient, a young architect, who came to me in deep depression. He had achieved everything society told him would bring fulfillment, professional success, financial security, social status. Yet he felt empty. His breakthrough came not when he focused more on himself, but when he began designing sustainable housing for low-income communities. His depression lifted not because he had found himself, but because he had found something worth living for. The question we must ask is not, what can life offer me, but rather, what is life asking of me? This shift in perspective changes everything. It moves us from being passive recipients of life's circumstances to active respondents to life's challenges. Each situation, each moment presents us with a question, and our lives become meaningful through the answers we provide through our actions and choices. Consider another example. A brilliant scientist I worked with was devastated when her research project failed after years of work. Her initial response was to question her abilities, her worth, her very identity. But when she shifted her perspective to ask what this situation was demanding of her, everything changed. She realized her setback could serve as a valuable lesson for other researchers, helping them avoid similar pitfalls. By sharing her experience openly, she found new meaning in her perceived failure. This brings us to a crucial point. Meaning can be found in any situation, even in suffering. And this is essential, suffering itself is not necessary for meaning. What matters is our attitude toward the unavoidable suffering that life presents. Let me share something I observed during my darkest days. In the camps, we had people from all walks of life, intellectuals, workers, artists, business people. The ones who maintained their inner strength weren't those who kept asking, why me? Or when will this end? They were the ones who, even in those horrific conditions, found ways to help others, to share their last piece of bread, to offer words of encouragement. They demonstrated that even in the most dehumanizing circumstances, one can choose to act with humanity. Now you might be thinking, but those are extreme circumstances. What about my ordinary life, my daily struggles? The principle remains the same. Meaning is not found in extraordinary circumstances, but in our response to life's ordinary moments. It's in how we show up for our families, how we treat our colleagues, how we contribute to our communities. Consider the parent who spends hours helping with homework, not because it's enjoyable, but because it serves their child's development. Or the nurse who works night shifts, not because it's convenient, but because patients need care around the clock. These people aren't pursuing self-actualization, they're responding to life's call to responsibility. This brings us to another crucial point. Responsibility is the essence of existence. We are not merely responsible to something, but responsible for implementing meaning in our lives. Every situation, every relationship, every challenge presents us with the opportunity to respond meaningfully. This responsibility cannot be transferred or avoided. It is uniquely ours. Let me tell you about a corporate executive I counseled. He had reached the pinnacle of his career, but felt increasingly disconnected from his work. His breakthrough came when he stopped asking, what more can I achieve? And started asking, what can I contribute? He began mentoring young professionals, not because it advanced his career, but because it allowed him to share his experience in service of others' growth. The paradox is beautiful. By focusing less on his own development and more on contributing to others, he experienced profound personal growth. This is the secret that self-help books often miss. Genuine growth comes not from direct pursuit, but as a byproduct of living meaningfully. We must also address the role of values in this process. Values are not abstract concepts, but concrete guides for action. They become real only when we embody them in our choices and actions. Freedom of choice carries with it responsibility. The responsibility to choose well, to choose in alignment with meaningful values. I've observed that many people today suffer not from the traditional neuroses of the past, but from what I call an existential vacuum, a sense of meaninglessness, a feeling that life has no purpose. This vacuum often manifests as boredom, addiction, or aggression. The cure is not to focus more on ourselves, but to discover what life is asking of us. Think about technology and social media. We are more connected than ever, yet many feel increasingly isolated. Why? Because virtual connections, while valuable, cannot replace the meaning found in genuine human relationships and real-world contributions. The solution isn't to withdraw from technology, but to use it in service of meaningful engagement with others and with life's challenges. Let me share another observation. Many people believe that meaning must be grand or world-changing. This is a misconception. Meaning can be found in the smallest acts of kindness, in the simplest expressions of love, in the most routine responsibilities fulfilled with consciousness and care. A smile offered to a stranger, a moment of patience with a difficult colleague, a small act of generosity. These are not insignificant. They are the building blocks of a meaningful life. Consider the story of a janitor I met at a hospital. When asked about his job, he didn't talk about cleaning floors. He spoke about being part of the healing environment, about how his work contributed to patient recovery by maintaining a clean, safe space. He had found meaning not by pursuing self-actualization, but by connecting his daily work to a larger purpose. This brings us to another crucial understanding. Meaning is not something we create out of nothing. It already exists in the situations life presents to us. Our task is to discover it, to perceive it, and to respond to it. This requires what I call meaning sensitivity, the ability to see the meaningful possibilities in each situation. Let me be clear about something. This approach to life doesn't guarantee constant happiness or the absence of suffering. What it offers is something more valuable, the ability to bear whatever comes with dignity and purpose. It provides a framework for living that transcends both success and failure, joy and sorrow. Think about your own life for a moment. When have you felt most fulfilled? I would bet it wasn't when you were focused on your own happiness or development, but when you were fully engaged in something meaningful beyond yourself. Perhaps it was caring for someone in need, solving a challenging problem, creating something of value, or standing up for what you believed in. This brings us to the concept of what I call meaning-centered living. It involves three key elements. First, the freedom to choose our response to any situation. Second, the responsibility to make choices that serve meaningful purposes. And third, the recognition that life's meaning must be discovered rather than invented. Consider how this applies to relationships. Many people approach relationships asking, what can I get from this, or how does this person make me feel? But meaningful relationships develop when we ask, what am I called to be for this person, or how can I contribute to their well-being? This shift from taking to giving, from receiving to contributing, transforms not just our relationships, but our entire experience of life. One of the most dangerous illusions in our modern world is the belief that we must feel good or be in the right mood to act meaningfully. This is backwards thinking. Action precedes emotion. When we act in accordance with meaning, positive emotions often follow, but they should not be our primary goal or prerequisite for action. Let me illustrate this with a story from my clinical practice. A musician came to me, having lost all passion for his art. He waited day after day for inspiration to return, for the right feeling to create music again. His breakthrough came when he realized he had it backwards. He needed to play music regardless of his feelings. By taking action, by showing up at his instrument day after day, the passion gradually returned. Not because he pursued it directly, but because he committed to the meaningful act of creating music. This principle applies universally. Consider the person who waits to feel motivated before exercising, or the writer who waits for inspiration before writing, or the person who waits to feel loving before showing love. They have it backwards. We must act first, and the feelings will follow. This is not mere behavior modification. It is about aligning our actions with meaning, regardless of our temporary emotional states. In my years of observation, I've noticed that those who lead the most meaningful lives are often those who have stopped asking, what do I feel like doing? And started asking what needs to be done. They understand that meaning exists in the space between what life demands. Let me share another profound truth. Meaning can be found not just in creation and achievement, but also in the attitude we take toward unchangeable fate. When we face circumstances we cannot change, we are still free to change ourselves, to choose our attitude toward these circumstances. This is not mere positive thinking. It is the ultimate exercise of human freedom. I remember a paralyzed athlete I worked with. Initially, he was consumed by what he had lost, his mobility, his career, his independence. His transformation began when he shifted his focus from what he couldn't change to what he could still do. He became a mentor to other injured athletes, sharing his experience and wisdom. His physical circumstances hadn't changed, but by choosing his attitude and finding new ways to contribute, he discovered new meaning in his life. This brings us to another crucial point, the importance of what I call meaning moments. These are opportunities for meaningful action that present themselves in our daily lives. They might be small, a chance to show kindness, to speak truth, to create beauty, to right a wrong. The meaningful life is built not on grand gestures, but on recognizing and responding to these moments. Consider the teacher who stays after school to help a struggling student, not because it's required, but because it's needed. Or the business person who chooses ethical practice over easy profit, not because anyone would know, but because it's right. These are meaning moments, and our response to them shapes not just our lives, but the world around. We must also address the role of failure in a meaningful life. In our success-oriented culture, failure is seen as something to be avoided at all costs. But from the perspective of meaning, failure is not the opposite of success. It is often a pathway to meaning. When we fail while pursuing something meaningful, we haven't failed at life. We've succeeded in living meaningfully, regardless of the outcome. I worked with a social entrepreneur whose first 3 ventures failed. Each failure taught her something valuable, not just about business, but about herself and her values. Her 4th venture succeeded not because she pursued success more cleverly, but because she remained faithful to her meaningful purpose through the failures. The failures were part of her meaningful journey, not deviations from it. Let's talk about anxiety and its relationship to meaning. Many people believe they must overcome anxiety before they can live meaningfully. But anxiety is often a sign that we care about something important, that something matters to us. The question is not how to eliminate anxiety, but how to use it as a compass pointing toward what we find meaningful. I remember a public speaker who came to me paralyzed by anxiety before presentations. His breakthrough came not from eliminating the anxiety, but from reframing it. His anxiety showed how much he cared about communicating his message effectively. By focusing on the meaning of his message rather than his feelings about delivering it, this leads us to another vital understanding, the relationship between meaning and time. Many people live either trapped in the past or anxiously anticipating the future. But meaning exists in the present moment, in the concrete situations and choices before us right now. The past is where we learn from, the future is what we prepare for, but meaning is found in the present. Consider how this applies to regret. Many people are paralyzed by regret over past choices or missed opportunities. But regret becomes meaningful when it informs our present choices, when it helps us recognize and respond to the meaning possibilities in front of us now. We must also address the role of success in a meaningful life. Success and meaning are not the same thing. Success is achieving what we aim at, while meaning is found in aiming at what is worth achieving. Many successful people lead meaningless lives. Let me share a story about a wealthy businessman who came to me in despair. He had achieved every conventional measure of success, wealth, status, power, but felt his life was empty. His transformation began when he stopped pursuing more success and started asking what his success could serve. He used his resources and influence to support causes he believed in, not for recognition, but because it was meaningful. This brings us to the concept of legacy. Many people want to leave a legacy, but they think of legacy in terms of achievements or possessions. True legacy is about the meaning we create in others' lives, the values we embody, the way our choices influence others toward meaningful living. Legacy is not what we leave for people. Consider the difference between fame and influence. Fame is about being known by many people, while influence is about making a meaningful difference in people's lives. One of my most influential patients was a school teacher who never became famous, but profoundly influenced generations of students through her dedication to their growth and development. We must also address the role of community in meaningful living. While meaning is personally discovered, it is often socially expressed and supported. We need others not to tell us what is meaningful, but to support us in living meaningfully, to witness our commitments, to share in our struggles and celebrations. This is why isolation is so devastating to meaning. Not because we need others to create meaning for us, but because meaningful living often involves contribution to and connection with others. The antidote to isolation is not just social connection, but meaningful engagement with others in shared purposes and values. Let me share something about the relationship between meaning and pleasure. There's nothing wrong with pleasure. It's a natural part of life. But pleasure alone cannot sustain us. Pleasure is like a byproduct of meaningful living, not its purpose. When we make pleasure our purpose, it loses its sweetness. When it comes as a byproduct of meaningful living, it enriches our experience without dominating it. The greatest danger in our modern world is not suffering. It's meaninglessness. When people come to me speaking of emptiness, boredom, or a lack of purpose, they're not describing a mental illness in the traditional sense. They're describing what I call an existential vacuum. This vacuum is particularly dangerous because nature abhors a vacuum, and in its absence, people will fill it with destructive substitutes, whether through excessive work, mindless consumption, addictive behaviors, or the pursuit of power. Let me share a particularly illuminating case from my practice. A young executive was working 70 hours a week, earning more money than she could spend, yet feeling increasingly empty. She came to me not because she was depressed in the clinical sense, but because, as she put it, nothing means anything anymore. Her workaholic tendency wasn't the cause of her problems, it was her attempt to fill the meaning vacuum in her life. What she discovered through our work together was profound. Meaning cannot be pursued through intensity of experience or accumulation of achievements. She had been trying to fill an existential void with occupational success, much like trying to fill a spiritual hunger with physical food. Her transformation began when she started asking different questions. Not, how can I be more successful? But, what is success in service of? This brings us to a crucial distinction, the difference between means and ends. Many of us get so caught up in the means, making money, gaining status, accumulating possessions, that we forget to question the ends. These means are supposed to serve. We climb the ladder of success only to find it's leaning against the wrong wall. Consider how this plays out in relationships. Many people approach relationships as means to their own happiness or security. But meaningful relationships only develop when we see them as ends in themselves. When we value the other person, not for what they can give us, but for who they are. This is true love. Not the romantic notion of love as feeling, but love as meaningful action and commitment. I remember working with a couple on the brink of divorce. Both were focused on what they weren't getting from the relationship. Their breakthrough came when they shifted their focus from what they could get to what they could give, from what the relationship should do for them to what they could do for the relationship. Their marriage was saved, not by finding new ways to be happy together, but by finding meaningful ways to grow. This principle extends beyond personal relationships to our relationship with work. Many people see work merely as a means to an end, earning money, gaining status, securing comfort. But meaningful work transforms when we see it as an end in itself, as a way to contribute value to the world. The janitor who sees their work as contributing to public health, the teacher who sees their work as shaping future generations, the business person who sees their work as solving real problems, they've discovered the secret of meaningful work. Let me share something about the relationship between meaning and time. We often hear people say they're killing time or passing time. But time is life itself. When we kill time, we're killing part of our life. The meaningful life is not measured by its length, but by its depth. Not by how much time we have, but by what we do with the time we have. I worked with a terminal cancer patient who taught me something profound about this. In her final months, she lived more meaningfully than many people do in decades. She wrote letters to her children, reconciled with estranged family members, and documented her life lessons for future generations. She showed that it's not the quantity of time that matters, but the quality of meaning we create within whatever time we have. This brings us to another crucial understanding, the relationship between meaning and choice. Every moment presents us with choices, not just about what to do, but about who to become. We are not merely the product of our circumstances or our past, we are also the product of our choices. Even in the most restricted circumstances, we retain the freedom to choose our attitude, our response, our way of being. Let me illustrate this with a story from my own experience. In the camps, we had no control over our circumstances, but we could choose how to respond to those circumstances. I observed two men receiving the same news, that their families had perished. One fell into despair and gave up on life. The other became a source of strength and comfort to others, saying, "My family would want me to help others survive." Same circumstance, different choices, profoundly different meanings. This brings us to the concept of responsibility. Many people see responsibility as a burden, something to be minimized or avoided. But responsibility is our ability to respond, our responsibility. It's not a burden, but a privilege, not a constraint, but the very source of our freedom to create meaning. Consider how this applies to suffering. We cannot always choose whether we suffer, but we can choose how we suffer, what meaning we give to our suffering. This doesn't mean suffering is good or necessary for meaning. It means that even in suffering, meaning remains possible through the attitude we choose to take toward our suffering. I worked with a chronic pain patient who transformed her relationship with suffering. Instead of asking, why me? She began asking, what for? She discovered that her experience gave her unique insights that could help others dealing with chronic pain. Her suffering didn't become less painful, but it became meaningful through a choice to use it in service of others. This leads us to another vital truth, the relationship between meaning and authenticity. Many people think authenticity means expressing whatever they feel in the moment. But true authenticity is about being true to our values, our chosen meanings, even when our feelings pull us in other directions. It's about being faithful to what we find meaningful, not just what we find comfortable or convenient. I remember a business leader who came to me struggling with this very issue. He was acting authentically by expressing his frustrations and criticisms freely, believing this made him more real and genuine. His breakthrough came when he realized that true authenticity wasn't about expressing every feeling, but about aligning his actions with his deeper values and the meaning he wanted to create. Let's address something crucial about meaning and goals. While having goals is important, meaning transcends goal achievement. Goals are finite. We either achieve them or we don't. Meaning is infinite. It continues to unfold through how we pursue our goals and what we do after we achieve them. The meaningful life is not about reaching destinations, but about how we travel the path. Consider how this understanding transforms our view of achievement and failure. I've worked with Olympic athletes who won gold medals yet felt empty, and others who never made it to the podium but found deep meaning in their pursuit of excellence. The difference wasn't in their achievements but in their relationship to meaning. Those who pursued excellence in service of something beyond themselves found meaning regardless of the outcome. Let me share something vital about the relationship between meaning and happiness. In our culture, happiness has become almost an obligation. We feel guilty when we're not happy. But this pursuit of happiness paradoxically makes us unhappy. True happiness, like self-actualization, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. It is the unintended consequence of living meaningfully. I remember working with an artist who had lost her joy in creating. She had been successful, but her work felt empty. Her transformation began when she stopped trying to create successful art and started creating meaningful art, art that expressed truth as she saw it, art that connected with others' experiences, art that served something beyond her own success. The joy returned not because she pursued it, but because she pursued meaning. This brings us to a fundamental truth about human nature. We are meaning-seeking creatures. Just as our bodies hunger for food, our spirits hunger for meaning. But unlike physical hunger, which can be satisfied with a nutritious food, our hunger for meaning can only be satisfied through authentic engagement with life's challenges and opportunities. Consider the metaphor of a compass. A compass doesn't tell you where to go. It only shows you which way is north. Similarly, meaning doesn't tell us exactly what to do, but it provides orientation, a way to navigate life's choices. The meaningful life isn't about following a preset path, but about maintaining our orientation toward what matters most. Let me address something crucial about meaning and aging. Many people fear aging because they see it as a process of losing youth, abilities, possibilities. But from the perspective of meaning, aging can be a process of gaining wisdom, understanding, the ability to contribute in deeper ways. I've worked with elderly individuals who found their most meaningful work in their later years. not despite their age, but because of the perspective and wisdom their years had given them. This brings us to the relationship between meaning and legacy. Your true legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die, it's what you give while you live. Every meaningful choice, every act of kindness, every moment of standing for what matters, these create ripples of meaning that extend far beyond our immediate awareness. I think of a teacher I worked with who was discouraged because she couldn't see the impact of her work. Years later, she received letters from former students describing how her belief in them had changed their lives. Her meaningful actions had created effects she couldn't see at the time. This is true for all of us. We never know the full extent of our meaningful choices. As we conclude our time together, let me leave you with this final understanding. Meaning isn't something we find like a hidden treasure, nor is it something we create out of nothing. Meaning is something we recognize and respond to. It exists in the space between what life asks of us and how we answer. The question isn't what is the meaning of life. The question is, what meaning will you give to this moment, this challenge, this opportunity? Life is constantly asking us questions through the situations it presents. Our lives become meaningful through the answers we give, not in words, but in actions, in choices, in the way we live. Remember, every moment holds the possibility of meaning. Every interaction is an opportunity to contribute. Every challenge is an invitation to respond meaningfully. You don't need to wait for perfect circumstances or complete understanding. You need only to respond to what life is asking of you right now, in this moment. Don't ask what you can get from life. Ask what life is asking of you. Don't pursue self-actualization. Pursue self-transcendence. Don't chase happiness. Create meaning. And remember that your life has meaning not because of what you achieve, but because of who you become in service of what matters most. The choice is always yours. Not the choice of circumstances, but the choice of response. Not the choice of what happens to you, but the choice of what happens through you. Not the choice of what you feel, but the choice of how you live. Go forth not in pursuit of self-actualization, but in pursuit of meaning. Let your actions be guided not by what feels good, but by what serves good. Let your choices be shaped not by what you can get, but by what you can give. And remember that in every moment, in every choice, in every response, you are not just living your life, you are creating meaning that extends far beyond yourself. The meaningful life awaits not in some distant future, but in this very moment. It exists not in grand gestures, but in small choices. It manifests not in what we accomplish, but in who we become. And it reveals itself not in the pursuit of happiness, but in the pursuit of purpose. As you leave here today, remember, you are not here merely to find yourself. You are here to give yourself to something worthy of your gifts, your talents, your unique capacity to create meaning in a world that desperately needs it. The question is not whether your life can have meaning. The question is what meaning you will choose to give it. Thank you, and may you find the courage to answer life's questions with meaningful choices, meaningful actions, and meaningful love.